Welcome to Let's Talk Death, conversations to inform and inspire. Let's Talk Death is a series of conversations with some amazing people from various fields. Our goal through these conversations is to normalize, educate, and demystify the taboo around death, dying, and the journey of grief. Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this conversation. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone. Our guest today is Susan McCue. Susan is a licensed clinical social worker who has worked in the field of death, dying, and bereavement since 2005. Her career began first as a hospice social worker, then as a hospice bereavement counselor. After obtaining her LCSW, Susan opened a private therapy practice specializing in grief and loss, mainly focusing on bereavement needs following the immediate death of a loved one. During this time, Susan also provided grief and loss presentations at the community, state, national, and international levels on topics including the difference between the natural process of grief and more complicated grief responses. Susan's personal background includes multiple deaths in her immediate family, which led to Susan's interest and passion for the field of death, dying, and bereavement. She is one of 9 children born in an Irish-American family. Her father died at age 64, her mother at age 69, and 6 of their 9 children, Susan's siblings, died in their 50s and 60s. Susan finds her personal and professional life coming full circle now that she has entered hospice for comfort care related to her diagnosis of pulmonary fibrosis, a progressive disease with no cure. Susan's brother and sister also died of this disease. Susan volunteers as a Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation ambassador to participate in PF research and to share her story with other PF patients, families, and loved ones affected by the disease. She hopes to die peacefully at home, surrounded by her loved ones, while sharing tales, tall tales, and laughter. Susan, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
So I'm gonna ask the question, what was it like to hear your diagnosis?
Well, shocking. My sister had just had a double lung transplant for pulmonary fibrosis, and she died 7 weeks after the transplant. And that was in 2016. And in 2017, I was getting ready to go to Portugal to present about the ICD-11 and natural process of grief and more complicated grief responses. And I got the same diagnosis before I went to do the presentation in Portugal. So that was 2017. And when I waited to tell my brothers and sisters, because now we knew it was in our family. And it was a shock. It was devastating. And at that point, my interest shifted away from, at that time, I wasn't practicing because I was helping my sister who was getting the lung transplant. So since then, I've focused primarily on pulmonary fibrosis and the foundation and ways to I've just continued my practice, but now I'm volunteering and sharing with other people who are dying of this progressive disease and their families and caregivers and loved ones.
So as a professional in the field of death, dying, and grief, Do you feel that your work prepared you in any way?
100%. 100%. I am so ahead of the curve. I am, you know, my family history led me. I'll tell you a quick story.
Please.
My father was in hospice care. No, he wasn't in hospice care when he was dying of colon cancer, no, prostate cancer in his early 60s. And there was a nurse who came to him before he died and helped him with pain medication. And I misunderstood. I was talking to my sister a couple of years later when I started going to grad school and then focusing on hospice care. And I said, well, the reason why I'm doing this is to pay it forward because that nurse came a hospice nurse came to care for Dad. And my sister said, that wasn't a hospice nurse. So my whole career was based on an error that led me right where I needed to be. So pretty funny. I mean, I was like, oh, well, he wasn't in hospice. Nope. So it really was a happy mistake. Yeah.
So we've had conversations with Ken Ross, whose mother is Elizabeth Ross.
Uh-huh.
And part of her research and the research of others who we've also had on our show suggested that for people, excuse me, that were dying a natural death, when they had the opportunity to share with loved ones all they needed to say, to almost complete the incomplete, that their death was an easy transition versus those that seem to have a much more agitated transition. Has that been your experience? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. Since I was diagnosed, we discovered, my pulmonologist, I go to a center of excellence for advanced lung disease, and he sent my blood samples to get genetic testing. So it turns out that this disease runs in our family, and my cousins have it, and it's a genetically based issue. We have errors in our DNA. And so that really prompted the conversation to get to your question about talking about this disease and the complications of genetic testing and the ethics related to and choices that my family needed to make about whether to get tested or not, which enters into a whole new realm. But it promoted discussions, a great deal of discussion about the disease. And we've been living with it in our family, our large Irish American family, since my sister was diagnosed in 2009. So, I'm not good at math, but carry the 10 and then the square root of it's 1,000 years ago. So we have had conversations off and on about it. And I've been able to share my plans for how I'd like to see my death proceed. And I think I mentioned in my contact with you about an appropriate death. And what would that look like? And so we've had conversations planned, and my burial is going to be a green burial. And my husband and I did our will, and it's really promoted the longevity of being around this disease, has promoted many, many conversations. But at this point, when I was admitted into hospice, everybody is still shocked, of course. You know, so there you have it. There's the long progression of understanding. And then I'm getting visitors from all over the country, family members who are coming to see me and friends, because now it's very real. It's 3 months or less, supposedly. So,
do you find peace in having been able to design your own goodbyes?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I I I try to do it as gently as possible, because I have to remember that this is where I am, and my loved ones are not necessarily in the same place. So, you know, I'm really comfortable talking about death. I've been around it for, well, of course, we all have for our whole lives, but I am being an educator in the field of death and dying. But I have to remember these are my gentle loved ones. And it's a two-sided conversation. And I am way more open than, you know, they may be ready for me to be. But so I'm attentive to their needs.
It's interesting, because that was going to be my next question. Do you feel that you're supporting others with your news?
Yes, definitely. I told my neighbors, we moved from California to Venice, Florida, and I started talking to my neighbors about this disease some time ago. And now I'm on oxygen and I can't leave the house, but because I need too much, and portable oxygen doesn't provide me enough. So my neighbors are kind of shocked, but they say, you prepared us well for this. So that's been my goal. I've been at peace with it, but
yeah, it's very interesting with death being such a natural part of life, that we still, as a society and a culture, shy away from the conversation of something inevitable for every one of us. It's just a matter of when and how. And how this really isn't a conversation that we have at the dinner table. I know that when I got into the field and, talking about designing your own goodbyes, I started feeling comfortable saying, at my funeral, I want everybody to wear cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is my color. I want the lining in my coffin to be cobalt blue. I want cobalt blue. And every time you see cobalt blue, that's going to be the trigger for you to think of me with a smile. There's my mother in cobalt blue. And at first, they were just shocked that I could be so jovial about this. But years later, they joke today about, oh God, got to go with that cobalt blue.
yeah. Good. It's a joke now. That's what, I think we do that off and on in my family, where we'll joke. We're kind of have gallows humor. It's a part of the Irish culture. And we'll laugh about, this is ridiculously terrible. And then we'll laugh hysterically about how bad it is. So I'm glad your family's coming around to laughing about it. But it is something, isn't it? I mean, and you've been in the field for a long time, and I have too. And I've talked about it this whole time. And I think, in my family, we come by it honestly, with all of the deaths in my immediate family. My siblings are only me and my two sisters left. So we know this process, and this will be the first time that it can happen in a way that is comfortable and peaceful, because all of the other deaths were complicated and just tormenting in a way. And the grief process has been traumatic, because there have been so many deaths, and one after the other. So that's why I'm hoping with all the training I've had from so many wonderful people over the years, and all the contact I've had all over the world from professionals, that I can make the plans, but as they say, make plans, but don't plan the outcome, because you never know what's really going to happen, you know. But I'm hopeful. My hospice team is wonderful, and they know I was a hospice social worker, so I kind of get props for that, I think.
So with years in the field and facing your own demise, do you fear death?
I fear the discomfort that can come in terms of breathing, because pulmonary fibrosis is scarring of the lungs, and eventually the scars become it blocks the lungs so much that you can't breathe, no matter how much oxygen you're given. So I talked to my hospice nurse who came over on Tuesday, and I said, I'm really cool with everything, with planning, and I'm just concerned about, I have morphine and Ativan for air hunger, and which we probably all heard about in this field. But I'm afraid of the side effects, and I don't want to be sick from those. I just want to be comfortable. And she just looked at me very clearly and said, you don't have to worry about that right now. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I kind of am.
Just like you're planning, your goodbyes and designing your goodbyes. Yeah, because when that time comes, you don't want to have to worry about it, which is the whole point of taking control of one's demise. I do have a question, especially for our audience, if you would be kind enough. You mentioned a green burial, I believe. Can you explain what that is to our audience?
Well, it's just a wonderful concept for me. It is a burial in which you're not embalmed, and you are put in you choose what you'd like to be buried in. And and it needs to be biodegradable. You need to find, I'm going to the Prairie Creek Conservancy, a nature conservancy in Gainesville, and they have requests. They tell you how to do it. The funeral home contracts with in our funeral plans. So the green burial is basically a burial in the ground, but without being embalmed and with only biodegradable products. So some people just are comfortable with being put in a shroud and placed in the ground. And I felt a little more, I wanted to go a little more high tech. So we're having a bamboo casket. And it's in this beautiful, huge nature conservancy where I'll be buried. And if you want to know more about green burials, of course, you can go to the Google, as my husband and I always say, and find out more about it. For me, it's an alternative. I really didn't want to be cremated, and I didn't want the formal burial process. And we always thought that this felt like a more natural way to stay in the earth and be a part of it.
Isn't that actually the way it used to be?
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you believe in spirits? Do you believe in the afterlife?
I do, because my family is with me. All of my brothers and sisters and my parents, and we all, because we're raised, both of my parents are Irish American, and not far, we're only second generation from the old country. And we have animism, the idea that the spirits are amongst us is part of Irish folklore. And so we're very comfortable with that concept. And, you know, we practice it regularly, knowing that we have signs and messages, of course, that people are frequently do. And so I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a big party. In fact, I'm looking forward to so much that I feel bad for my husband and my family members. And you know, because I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Where's the bus? You know, let's go. But you know,
you can remind them that you're going to know what's going to go on afterwards. Who's crying, who's not, who's celebrating, who's honoring your wishes of life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing it's amazing belief, and we here at Heal Grief believe that as long as one continues to talk and share stories of their person, they are forever with them in their heart and mind.
Mm-hmm.
That they don't die, just their physical presence does, but not their spirit.
Yeah, and we go two ways in our family. We say, and we all like to take naps. And so my brother was dying in 2023 of pulmonary fibrosis. I was talking to him about, did he think, you know, what were his ideas about what happens after you die? And he said, well, I don't really know. And I said, well, you either get a really great nap indefinitely after you die, or you go and have a big party with family. So it's a win-win situation. You can either a good nap or, you know, be with family, with friends.
Maybe in that transition, you're getting the nap to be with the family and friends that have transitioned already to the other side.
Yeah. And, you know, I used to, when I had my grief and loss practice, people would ask me about that, and they talk about their own concepts. And I would say, nobody knows, really. So whatever you want to believe it wholeheartedly. It's your belief, you know. And it comforted me, and it comforted them, that there's so much freedom in the way that you know, think about it. There are people, of course, that have near-death experiences, and those are lovely and wonderful. So I don't have the answer, but I know what I'm looking forward to, one way or the other: a nap or big party.
We're coming up on time. Is there anything you would like to, words of wisdom, or anything you would like to offer as a departure to our audience?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, there is such grace in a high level of being around someone who's dying or someone who has died. The experiences takes me and the people that I worked with out of the daily life process. Very high-pitched experience that can be very cathartic and lovely at the same time that it's very sad, bittersweet. And you know, when I was a grief counselor, I would talk about the grief pot in one hand and daily life in the other, and how they offered structure. And in the middle is the fulcrum. Imagine a teeter-totter, and in the middle is the fulcrum that holds the balance. Mm-hmm. And that's where to go when you're being pulled first into the grief pot and then into daily life, to center yourself in the fulcrum and rest there for a minute, just to, even a second, because it's a very, as you know, complicated through all the senses, the physical. I don't think I have to explain to people, but a lot of people will say it's just the emotions. And of course, it's the 5 steps of grief. And it's like, oh, that's not it. Way more complicated: physical, emotional, spiritual. What am I leaving out here? Every area of your body, and I mean, your being is affected.
I think life becomes more meaningful.
It's an elevated experience. It can. I mean, I've worked with people where it didn't become more meaningful, it became more unprocessed. And that's understandable. That was their path. But yeah, I think over time, that's what you like. Look at your kids. They said, yeah, okay, we're going with that color. It takes time to process this stuff.
Mm-hmm. My work, Susan, has taught me how to love more deeply, forgive more quickly, and to be as present in the moment as possible, because we don't know when we're taking our last breath.
Mm-hmm. And what would it be like if you did know? Like this is where I am. I know. I think about, I think, and that was just my last Christmas. I just had my last birthday. This is my last spring. And, I'm saying goodbye and then saying hello to where I am now.
Susan, wow, what an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being our guest here and sharing your journey here at Let's Talk Death. And to our audience, for more episodes or to learn more, visit us at healgrief.org. And if you know of a bereaved adult, refer them to our Actively Moving Forward app, where adults of all ages connect with others experiencing a similar death loss. Lastly, sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links of future episodes of Let's Talk Death. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time here on Let's Talk Death. Susan, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Fred.